Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button, and if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Down with Webster. Self-titled. Down with Webster is a Canadian rap rock group. I have previously reviewed their most popular EP, Time to Win Volume 1, and their most recent album, V, both of which will be linked in the corner if you're curious to go check those out. However, we're back yet again with another D-Dub review, this time their debut self-titled full-length album released in 2007. This was a very DIY record, released independently from the band and pretty much recorded in its entirety in the group's garage studio. This is the rawest form of Down with Webster you can engage with. Also, the full album, as far as I'm aware, isn't available on streaming, at least it wasn't for me, but there is a good rip of it on YouTube that I actually used to listen to the album. It will all be linked in the description if you want to check the album out for yourself. Anyway, with that preamble finished, let's just dive in. What are my thoughts on Down with Webster's self-titled album? Let's find out as I review it, track by track. We will start with the singles, with there being two of them. The first being Weekends, which really doesn't feel like the Down with Webster I know. Doesn't really feel like any era of the band for that matter. It's very much dominated by a pop song structure, but there's very minimal rapping on the song, and I'd say the band is far better known as a hip-hop group rather than a pop group. The only rapping on the track, which I believe is done by Pat, is on the bridge and is a measly 8 bars. It feels like nothing. You can blink and you'd miss it, but honestly I'm glad it's shorter. Any dive deeper than the shallow first impression shows a solid flow but kinda amateurish cadence, which is fair since it was the group's first single. The rest of the track is pretty sunny. The verses have this relaxed swagger over the pounding percussion, rattling triangle and uplifting keys, and the chorus ties the song together with a general statement of looking forward to weekends. Honestly, it's a fun song. Wouldn't be my choice for a summer jam, but I get its appeal. Not bad. And the second and final single, the opener, Miracle Mile, which as far as I know is no different from the version that was eventually re-released on their breakthrough EP, Time to Win Volume 1. Again, corner video, but honestly, my thoughts on this song have not changed much since that video. If you want the full in-depth breakdown, you know where to look. But to give a quick TLDR, it's extremely triumphant with soaring horns and expansive slaps of percussion. I do think it goes a little bit overboard on the musical side of things, but the chorus and verses are catchy and competent enough to where I think it's good. Wasn't a favorite of mine on Time to Win, and it isn't a favorite on here either, but certainly not the worst. Now for the rest of the tracks. Pop Your Trunk is where we finally start to see the Down with Webster I'm familiar with. The song has kind of a nu metal instrumental with its gritty guitar work that is somehow equal parts clean and suffocated in the mix. The verses are dominantly hip-hop, the guitar mostly vanishes for those parts, making way for this decent snappy percussion and little trumpet embellishments. Quite a comforting, catchy beat all around, and I also like the energy of the song. The verses are already quite the improvement from their debut single, and the chorus is extremely infectious. Really can see the song being a hit at like a 2000s frat party. There are a few lyrical duds here, which is expected given that the song is about, in the grand scheme of party songs, shaking ass. It's energetic, it's lively, you can definitely get bodies bouncing with this one, so I think it's enjoyable enough. Fun is not as fun as that exclamation mark may make it seem. To put it bluntly, this beat is fucking weird, man. It's like one of those memes where you try to make the worst beat possible that still sounds semi-competent. There's a lot to unpack here. There's acoustics, sharp crystalline synths, and wavy dubstep synths as well. There's also pretty organic percussion and what sounds like a predator clicking noise. I don't know if I fully like it or not, but it's definitely a grower of an instrumental. The actual performances on the track are okay, definitely still on the weird side with exaggeratedly youthful inflections and some obnoxious ones as well. The only verse I actually enjoyed was the first one. The track is also just way too long. It starts to get tired around the 3-minute mark, and this one's nearly 5. It's well paced enough, and I wouldn't really cut a part out if I had a say, but like I said, it's a weird song. Dynamite, which is only about a minute long, and one of the most annoying things I've heard in recent months. I'm sure it's meant to be silly and kind of reminds me of some of the goofier Blink-182 songs on their earlier albums. That doesn't change the fact that it's obnoxious. Instrumental's alright, crashing drums and a plucky bass, but the performance is full of nonsensical cadences and slurred deliveries that make it sound like it was recorded drunk. I'm sure the group had a blast recording this, but I do wish that vibe was projected better than what was given here. Odies is kind of a favorite of mine. I really enjoy this one. I think the reason why I'm so fond of this track is just because it doesn't do anything off-kilter or off-putting. It just comes off like a regular pop rap track, and that's what I like about it. There's this bright melody behind some fuzzy guitars and snappy percussion, very appealing instrumental, and all the performances are competent, the flows are good, and the chorus is fairly catchy. The lyrics are pretty basic, mostly about drinking alcohol like Odies. Sure, it may be a standard song, but I think it shines as one of the more appealing cuts on the album. Grind is quite the interesting case, as this track would later see release on Down with Webster's major label debut album, Time to Win Volume 2, a whole 4 years after this album was released. The song kind of reminds me of the poppier cuts that would eventually become big hits on Volume 1. The verses are very clean, the instrumental has a pretty smooth rock edge with punchy drums, kind of softer riffing, and the occasional blinking synth thrown in there somewhere. The chorus is nice and pretty infectious, as these lyrics just talk about dedicating yourself to this grind, but also trying to wow this love interest and flex the aspirations and the goals and the eventual money that would come from such a hustle. Also, kick-ass solo at the end of the song. One of my favorites here, pretty comfortably. Let Me In is a pretty solid track, but there are some parts about it that really weigh it down for me. I like most of the instrumental. It's a bit quicker with the ticking percussion and these deep horns that I can only describe as farty. They add a little bit of funk to the song and make it more of a braggadocious club banger, but they do start to get annoying. The verses done by Cam and Bucky are very solid. This might house some of their best flows on the album. They're very confident, they're very smooth. Cam's first verse has quite a few lyrical duds, but I kinda expected it, though the second verse is a lot better. I do enjoy this one, but I kinda wish I liked it a bit more. Gon' Do It might actually have my favorite instrumental on this record, dropping any real rock elements and giving an almost funky beat doused in bass, but having this irritatingly loud like cowbell that I think is just bashing on the chorus. It's a bit much, but damn, that bass is still smooth. Speaking of smooth, this flow. It's crazy to think that a track like Weekends and this coexist on the same record, because these don't sound like the same MCs, especially Cam on that second verse. What a confident and comfortable flow. Very well done, even if the lyrics are kinda nonsense. I will say though, I think the outro skit at the end goes on for a bit too long. I would have liked it if the track stayed under 3 minutes, or hell, didn't even have it at all. But as a whole, solid track. I would happily return to this one. 10 is a track that kinda reminds me of Dynamite, but not because it's an obnoxious, goofy song, but more so in the fact that it's a shorter interlude. This is the only track on the album to exclusively feature hype man Cap on vocals, and honestly, I kinda wish he was on here more. He has featured on earlier songs that I already covered, but I didn't feel his inclusions were all that noteworthy, but here he gives a full verse, and I think he does a good job. He has a very young inflection, which is fair since I don't even think he was 20 when this came out. The beat is solid and fittingly bombastic with this loud, booming percussion that kinda just sounds like beating on an oil drum, and this pretty repetitive sample that I did get sick of quickly. Thankfully, like I mentioned, the track is short, barely 2 minutes long, but I do think it's a decent addition to the track list. Coconuts is a song that I cannot take seriously even if I try to. I genuinely wish I could, but I can't get through the song without a wave of secondhand embarrassment washing over me. The beat has a kind of tropical acoustic side to it, these hollow taps of the percussion especially, but it's paired with distorted pulses of bass and shakers and little knickknacks being hit. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad beat, but there's no groove to it and it kind of just falls flat. You could probably guess what the song is mainly about lyrically, but there are also casual disses to other rappers and braggadocious flexing, but there's just no fire to the song. And for a track that tries to portray these guys as dominant and all that in a bag of chips, there's no flair. It almost comes off like a joke. I really don't get much out of this one, and it kind of makes me cringe. I hate to use that word, but it does. Not for me. This one's a pass. Go Go Girl definitely feels singular on this album. There's not much here that sounds like this one. It's as if all the groove that was supposed to be on Coconuts got transferred to this song, and now this song has twice the groove. The guitar riff and percussion really give off old school rock and roll vibes, and even the hook kind of matches that as well. It's quite a unique song with its chantable energy. All the flows here are solid too, especially Bucky's, but there is one element of the track I'm not as crazy about, and that's what's going on in the background. This track has live elements thrown in, from crowd squealing to announcer calls. I'm not sure if this song was recorded live or it's all just samples found or whatever, but I've never been fond of listening to live performances on a studio record, so that part just doesn't click with me inherently. The rest is an absolute hit and makes for an easy standard on the album. Big Time, the longest track on the album, just shy of 6 minutes. This track is also technically the closer, but there is a hidden track that I'll get to after this. Anyway, for a closer, this track soars with flying colors. It's very motivational and uplifting, having a similar grandiose vibe to Miracle Mile, with loud, shameless horns, a sing-along chorus about not giving up and knowing you'll make it in the end. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of a song I'd hear in some cheesy musical. There's also this resplendent solo that starts at about halfway point and kind of just keeps going. It starts to wear out its welcome welcome pretty quickly, as the entire back half is just the instrumental with some ad-libs from the performers. Its sheer length alone is unnecessary. If this track was cut almost perfectly in half, it would have been an absolute smash, and likely my favorite track. As it is, it's still good, and if I'm ever in the need for a pick-me-up, I know I'll be going back to this one. And finally, the close of Butta King, which, just given that name alone, I kinda expected to be silly, goofy, kinda lighthearted, but not really. The only thing that makes it any of that connect is some odd inflections on the chorus and these Bollywood-esque percussion. But aside from that, this track is surprisingly well done. The bass is dense and heavy, the flows and the cadences from each MC are some of the best on the album, and while the synths may be a bit blaring in the mix, their inclusion on the chorus is minimal but well executed. The fact that this was kinda omitted from the core tracklist and delegated to a hidden track is kind of a shame, because this one hits. Overall, this album definitely surprised me. I heard this album in full for the first time almost a year ago, and I wasn't fully sold on it, but for this re-listen and reappraisal, I found out that this is one of the group's better releases. It's got a good bit of variety, different influences, and even though I may not be a fan of a good chunk of the stupid lyrics on the record, the melodies and sheer passion from the MCs really help carry this record to a higher platform than Time to Win Volume 1 could ever achieve. It's kind of a shame that some of these tracks are lost to YouTube riffs, because I feel like the group would be remembered in fonder light if this album was more readily available. I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.